Welcome to the Hernia Gods podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elms. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or opinions of Orlando Health or any of our employers. And now, without further ado, let's talk hernias. Hello, this is Luke Elms, your mere mortal host, and I'm joined today for the Hernia Gods podcast by the esteemed Flavio Malcher. I think I pronounced that correctly. As we were speaking before, I'm an Okie, so I can barely pronounce my own name, much less somebody else's. But thank you so much for joining us.
You aced it, so you did it perfectly.
Perfect, yeah. I was trying to do my homework to make sure. I always have to make sure. So again, thank you so much for joining this episode of the Hernia Gods podcast. Obviously, you have recently continued or finished your term as the American Hernia Society president. But I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit of a discussion about your background, where you come from, and how you got where you are.
Sure, I'm happy to be here. It's always nice to have those podcasts to get to know people a little bit more in a different aspect of their lives, because sometimes we know someone from meetings, papers, lectures, and we don't really understand what is behind that scientific phase. So, as you said, my name is Flavio Malcher, and I was born and raised in Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro. I'm literally 4 blocks from the beach, and never thought about leaving my hometown and my country. In Brazil, we don't move around as frequent as we do here in the US. So it's very traditional. If you're born in a big center, you spend your whole life over there. So I graduated. My dad is an OBGYN. I graduated in med school in Brazil, in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and going straight to training, general surgery. Then we don't have a lot of fellowships. I did a second residency in minimally invasive, and then a master in science, also in minimally invasive surgery, and just rolling my career. I practiced 15 years in Brazil, and we can get into how I became a hernia surgeon. But at this point, I was getting very disappointed with my country, which I love dearly. But it probably was my midlife crisis. I turned 40 and I realized that nothing going to change in Brazil. And I discussed a lot with my wife. She's also OBGYN. And we decided to give a chance to see what could be done outside Brazil. And almost 10 years ago, we moved, initially to Orlando, actually. I spent a couple of years in Celebration, at the time Florida Hospital, Advanced Health, and then came to New York, a good opportunities over here, and have been a New Yorker for the last almost 80 years. So that's it.
Yeah, you know, I think that's such an interesting thing. Now, did you have to repeat any of your training? What was the pathway when you came from Brazil to the United States for both you? And I believe your wife's also a physician as well, correct?
Yes. So there's different pathways, but most of them require you to take a USMLE, and people complain that it's a hard test, but I think it's super fair. If US require US graduates to take it to be eligible for license, nothing more fair than require the same thing for ECFMGs. So if you believe that it's hard to take USMLE out of med school, try to do 20 years out of med school, because I graduated med school in 1997. So I make jokes that I graduated last century and I was trained last century, and that's absolute truth. And my ECFMG was from 2017. It's literally 20 years between my original graduation med school in Brazil and my US graduation with my ECFMG. So I took it, and then I had to make a choice between going back to residency training or not. And I was ready for it. But opportunity came in New York to apply for a license, and I made the whole process to prove my foreign training. They doubled the requirements. It was kind of a process. But I have a full license in New York. But actually I'm not a board certified surgeon in US. I'm a board certified, double certified in Brazil, but not in US. So that has been my career. I stay under big academic institutions, and I can be a surgeon with no restriction under the umbrella of those big academic institutions.
That's interesting. Yeah, one of my roles here in my job is I was on the credentialing committee for a long time, and we see a lot of people that have completed their training, and some of them are, extraordinarily talented, world leaders, and they come over, and it's tough because they don't meet, the standard requirements, and then the hoops that they have to jump through to be able to practice here. I have immense respect for that. I think I in the episode with Hernia, I was just talking. I don't know that I would have had the wherewithal to go through that process again. I would have been like, well, maybe it's time to be a farmer again or something like that. But whenever you were in Brazil, obviously it was some being a little disenchanted with your country as a whole. But your practice was it booming? Was it a very busy? Was it what you imagined it was going to be?
I couldn't complain at all. Me and my wife have good practice. In Brazil, it's very common to have public and private practices. 80% of the healthcare in Brazil, 75-80% of the healthcare in Brazil is the public system that is universal. And a quarter of the healthcare is through insurance, private insurance. So it's very common to have a job, on my case, on the university, where I went three to four times a week and spend one morning every day, or sometimes a couple of days a full day. And after that, you go to your second job. That is your clinic. You have private cases. So, and that was absolutely fine. I really can't complain of my practice in Brazil. The decision was not based that I was not able to practice what I want. It was actually the realization of the Brazil as a country. I love my country. It's a great place to visit. I go there 2-3 times a year and always feels like home. But it's hard to live over there. And it's only when you are looking from an outside perspective, you get to a realization of how sick things are. So I'll just give an example. I have 3 bulletproof cars. So when a civilian feels the need to have a bulletproof car, that's not normal, right? So, and you as a human being, you just adapt. And when you are high middle class, you have resources, you kind of protect yourself. For bad school, public school system, you pay private education. A bad free healthcare, you pay insurance, and you try to go around. But when it comes to public security, there's not a lot of ways around it. I mean, you can have a bulletproof car, but doesn't solve all of your problems. So, and anyways, but it was like trying to get a better situation in life, and actually with my kids as well. When we moved, I have a son and a daughter. They were 14 and 10. And I think it was just better to them to kickstart their adult life in US than in Brazil. And US is not perfect, as you and me, we all know, but it's still decent. And I hope they stay decent for at least a few decades more. But it's just a decent place to live.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, struggles that we all encounter in our daily lives and can feel pretty bleak at times. But, I'm not driving to work in a bulletproof car. And I think that obviously is a perspective that's hard to gain unless you've lived it. Whenever you decided to make the move, was it a tough decision? And in as much as, is it something that there was just like an event that eventually pushed you to the edge where you're just like, this has got to happen? Or was it something that you really struggled with for a long time?
No, nothing really happened. Nobody pointed a gun on my head or I have any catastrophe in my life. It was kind of a year or 2 year long of decisions and say, oh man, this is not working out. It's a family decision. I usually say that I don't gamble and I don't play the lottery, but because I already won the lottery with my wife 25 years ago. She has been a wonderful partner, and we have deep discussions. And it's really a family decision because it's make it or break it. Because when you move from your country, you move from your family as well, and it becomes only you, your wife, and your kids. There's nobody else around you. For sure, now the world is much smaller with WhatsApp, video calls, internet. It's much easier to keep contact, but it's not the same. So it was one of those decisions that this marriage goes forward or is just over because you really need to bet on yourselves. And gladly, it really worked out for us. But it's not a decision that you should take lightly, for sure. Always you need to be responsible with your family and do a stepwise. You always try to find return, and every time you want to cross a point of no return, you need to think twice. I always tell this to residents when doing surgery, it's some steps that you can't come back. So before cutting a muscle or dividing assisted duct, think twice because there's such a point there's no return. But until there, you have always options. So, but it was nothing abrupt.
So you came to the United States, and obviously you've been very successful since getting here, in by at least outside measures. And were you able to take the lessons that you learned from growing your practice and practicing in Brazil and translate those to the U.S. market, or was that something that it was such a different environment that it really that you kind of had to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, about how to grow a practice and how to develop what you've been able to develop here?
I don't think I accomplished what I accomplished in U.S. because I came to U.S. Your career is built up, right? So you do things today that will reflect on you on one way or another 2 years from now, 10 years from now. So you mentioned that I was president for American Heart Society until last September, but I was nominated governor for American Society back in Brazil. So that didn't happen once I came to Brazil. So I'm heavily robotic surgeon, but I was trained robotics back in Brazil, not only when I got here. And all those relationships and trust that you build in your career, they don't happen in a blink of an eye. It's just a reflection of decisions and dedication that you give to yourself for years and years. So it was just, but I can't deny that coming to US opened so many other doors. So probably I'm a much better robotic surgeon here than I would be in Brazil with full access robotics. So those kind of things really helps, but it's nothing that happens just in a blink of eye, as I said. It's something that you build along your career.
Do you feel like there's obviously some financial disparities between patient populations in Brazil, like you alluded to? Do you feel like the outcomes of your patients are notably better in the United States than they were with the patients that would be more of an equivalent to a private model in Brazil?
Not at all. So I usually say there are several Brazils. That is the public system Brazil, and that is the private system. In the private system, you have a niche of high-end insurance, and you have hospitals in Brazil that I used to work that are better than the one that I work right now. So you have high quality private, but for a very niche population that have access to it. So I was able to, as I mentioned, do robotic surgery, have access to almost any technology back there. But here, there's much more available for much more people. So this puzzles my mind when I see Americans complaining about stuff that I said, you have no idea what you're talking about, what you're complaining. And I'm very grateful to be able to have this international perspective. I think our brain works differently. We have a different, really literally perspective of things. I mean, this is a good example. My mind, I think in Portuguese. I talk in English for the last 9 years, but my brain works in Portuguese. And this is exhausting. We just got used to it. But it takes a tool. And I think that opens connections in your mind. I think you think differently. So every time I can have opportunity to listen to another international, not only doctors, but in business, on anything else, everyone that comes from international perspective brings a different flavor, and the opposite as well. When in Brazil, we have businessmen and women that come to work in Brazil, and they bring the U.S. perspective over there is also very interesting. So I think it really helps to have this international idea, and it helps you to be grateful to coming from a poorer country. I don't say Brazil is a poor country, but it's poorer than the U.S. and really gives you a different way to see things.
Yeah, I think that there are times that we get pretty proud of what we have, and it sometimes it leads to this thinking that somehow elsewhere that they're not able to do the same high quality things, and that may be true for resource availability and things like that. But I think with the, as you alluded to, the world getting smaller with the technology and the communication and all the videos that we're able to see of people operating and doing just incredible work throughout the world, it really just goes to show that the talent throughout the world is just immense, and so it's always interesting to get that kind of international perspective, because for many of people like myself, I've only ever practiced in the United States, and really I've only ever practiced in Orlando, Florida, in a place where the resources have been very accessible, and so that's it's nice to hear that that perspective is beneficial, as I suspected it would be.
But also there's a bias there as well. So I've heard many times that Brazilian surgeons are so skilled or so good. Yes, they are, but the ones that you watch operator here in the US are the top ones. So you have that as well. So every time that you see a great international graduate work in US, that person has gone through so much to be there. That is a natural selection bias. So I agree with what you just said, but we need to recognize there's another side of it, that is not everything's great in Brazil as you might think it is.
Right. I think, obviously there are a lot of people, the people that we see operating and the videos that we see online and those types of things, some of those are the top in the field. And that may not represent the masses. But I do think being able to obviously see those things does give perspective on what's possible. And and that's what I think is so beneficial. You talked about betting on yourself. And that's something that I have felt a lot over the course of my life. And it's all about perspective, right? So different people have different challenges that they have to overcome to reach the levels of success that they have. But most of the time, it's the perspective of that individual that kind of determines how much they feel like they're having to overcome. And that idea of betting on yourself, is that something that was always in you? Is that something that you kind of developed over a course of time? Is that something that you and your wife developed together? Because I've been, my wife's also a physician. We've been together since we were 17. And I think we kind of had this burn the boats mentality that, there was no going back. We were always just going to push forward no matter what the obstacle was. Where did you get that? And is that something that you have tried? How have you been able to instill that in your own kids?
Yeah. So as far as I can remember, I was always honor roll A student. Elementary, middle school, high school. Studying was never too hard to me. So it was a natural selection to go to college. I mean, for sure, we struggle, but it was something that it was just natural to me. And I feel that it was never hard to study. It just is, we might not like it, but once you do what you are asked to, things just happen, at least in my life. So I think that the way that I see is just, if you dedicate yourself to something, it usually pays off. It's not easy, but usually pays off. So I got so used to accomplish what I determine myself to do, that is always doubt. But when you collect a series of victories, and I'm not better than anyone, but I was able to graduate in high school very nicely, top 3 of my class. I was able to get to this med school that I selected. I was able to get to the residence program that I wanted. I was able to pass USMLE. So all those things happen, and you try to start believing more and more in yourself. And it's not because they are easy to do. It's because you dedicate yourself. And I believe that the tests, the process are not built to fail you. They are built to test you. So if you really dedicate yourself. And I think naturally, I think my wife, besides being so beautiful, she's one of the smartest person that I know. So I don't think I will be ever able to be together 25 years with someone that I don't recognize and admire, not only outside but also on her mind. She's more reserved than myself, but believe me, she's much smarter than I am. So I think that it's kind of create an environment that one challenge the other and always keep you both on the toes and just to get the best of you.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way about my situation. It's together we're much stronger than we ever would have been, and we've come a lot further together than we ever would have separate. It's really something that's been, we were lucky that we found each other when we did, and it worked out the way it did. It's always hard work, and going through training together was extraordinarily difficult. How did you guys find that difficult in your training, as you're dealing with the long hours and the lack of being near one another physically in those times? It's kind of hard to maintain relationships whenever you're just kind of passing in the night, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think marriage, as any relationship, is eternal commitment. So every day, every week, you need to commit yourself to that thing, to make that thing. Some days are bad days. Sometimes some days are better days. You just hold to the better days much more than the bad ones. We actually met in residency. I was her chief. She was some stuff that maybe would never happen to nowadays because everything's changed so much. But she was my intern, and then things kick out. So it's interesting because when we were young without kids, we tried to make our calls on the same day. So we miss each other in the same days. When I had kids, it's the opposite. You need to don't stagger the calls because somebody needs to be home with the kids. So, and I was just joking with her. She was back in Brazil. We were on Facebook or on FaceTime, and she asked me to find something on email. So I went through my emails to find something that she asked me. And suddenly I found emails from 16 years ago. So, and it was exchange of 7 emails that we are just arguing by email that we don't see each other, then something needs to be changed. So everyone said that 7 years crisis of the marriage. I think ours was with 9, because just reading those emails and just it's interesting to give perspective on things are not always easy. You just need to trust the process and the person that is beside you.
Yeah, we've had being together. My wife and I are coming up on 23 years together dating, and been married for almost 20. And what I have found is it's for us, it's around every 5 years or 6 years. Just the natural change of who you are as a person just changes naturally. And then you have like both of you changing and going through that process. And then kids come into the equation, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's incredibly stressful. And exactly what you said, like we went through coordinating our calls for years. And for some reason, we were just really bad at it. We've tried our best, but would always mess it up somehow and be, on call at the same opposite times, even when we didn't have children. And then when we had kids, it became very, very difficult. And luckily, we were able to have the means to afford a nanny, which is not something we had ever planned on. Honestly, unfortunately, my mother, she'd gotten ill and wasn't able to help take care of the kids like we thought. But it is so difficult to go through those times when you're both working, because you kind of have to meet each other again and kind of have to fall in love over and over the course of that long period of time. So you talked a lot about how you kind of progressed through, and it was obviously a ton of work, but you were fairly successful consistently. So, I know a lot of people that I've talked to, and myself included, many times we go through these periods of our lives that we're so successful career-wise that when we have a failure, some of our first failures may actually be all the way into our practice or into residency or something like that. How do you handle when you have like a complication? How does that affect you personally? How do you handle it with the patient, just in general?
Yeah, so I think I heard many years ago, when you have a complication, you kind of marry with this patient, so you need to be there. So you don't have how to dodge that bullet. I think the best thing to do is to own it. It's hard, it hurts, but it's better to rip off the band-aid and be with the patient, and as I said, own it and say, this is my responsibility. Even if it is not my fault, it's my responsibility to be here with you. I will be with you if you want me all the way to the end, whatever it takes. And be transparent with the patient all the time. There's always different ways to tell the same truth, but you need to find one that is better for the patient, the way that you deliver the message. Just keep it honest, sometimes you tell them what they don't want to listen. Be humble is never enough to call for help, for a second opinion. You don't need to wait the patient to want a second opinion. You can propose a second opinion early on the situation. So you know what? I tried 3 different ways to get you out of the situation. It doesn't look that I'm getting right. Maybe it's nothing else to be done, but do you mind if I call another surgeon just to take a second look and see what I'm missing here? And don't get angry when the patient get upset. Don't get angry when they want a second opinion. Don't get angry when they are angry with you. You need to understand that for you, probably just one more patient, one more complication, but for them is 100%, is everything that matters to them. So never lose perspective of the patient's perspective of the situation. When you round on a patient for 1 minute, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes, and then go move forward, they will stay on that hospital bed for the whole 24 hours. Getting punctures, getting blood, feeling pain, having fever, having chills, whatever, until you see them next day. And then for you is another 10 minutes, and for them is another 24 hours. So never lose that perspective that for them is all that matters. I got an old statistics professor in my master that explained to me statistic doesn't apply to one individual. The best way to explain this is if you put your head on the oven and your butt on the fridge, in average, you should be comfortable. And that's not true. So it doesn't matter to them that only 10% of the hernias come back. If it happens to them, it's 100%. So you never lose sight of that perspective and just be there. Sometimes they don't want you to be there, and you can help, but be honest, be available, try to be a better human being besides the patient.
Yeah, I feel like I spend being, especially in the elective side, a lot of what we do is just straight up psychology. People come in and see me. I had a patient even today in my clinic that, she was there and she was just terrified because she had been told that her hernia could explode. And I hear that frequently, at least in my patients. Maybe it's just me, but they're always concerned their hernia is going to explode out. And, to us, it's kind of like, oh, okay. But then, you have to put them in their perspective that that's not what they do every day. My mother was starting chemotherapy, and we were all very nervous. And even I was nervous, in the medical field. And a nurse came in and said something to her that really kind of resonated with me. She came in and she's like, "How are you doing?" My mom was like, "Well, I'm a little bit scared." And the nurse said, this may be your first time, but we do this every single day. And I've actually taken that and used it with my patients, and it really goes a long way to help with that. But I think that it's very difficult to stand in front of a patient, even if it's not something that you directly contributed to, but to stand there and be humble, but it's absolutely necessary. And I think they really appreciate that, especially if you've taken the time up front to get to know them and to really establish that relationship.
Yeah, and something that you touch is the tool that takes on us the bad complications, the loss of patients. Actually, last year in Chicago, when I was program chair for American Society, we invite a keynote lecture talked about the small cemetery that we all carry with ourselves. And it's not easy to recognize that, but it does happen. So different people, they cope in different ways. And the first step is really recognize that we need to cope with that somehow. So it takes a tool. And that's why when I'm coming to the last few decades of my career, I just recognize that as much as I love to do what I do, I don't want to keep doing the volume what I do, not because it hurts me, it's because you do 300-400 cases per year. Every single case, I worry about that patient. When I do a big case, I got a phone call at 2 a.m. for a mistake, and just things run in your mind. So I think we can do more than just operate. And I wish that I can find some midterm in my next cycle in career to give back, not only with surgery, but probably possibly with something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's I have an interest in physician wellness, and they talk about the primary trauma of the patient that as they're going through it, and the secondary trauma that it happens to the patient's family, or to the patient, to the surgeon and the people that have taken care of them. But the people I think that probably are not recognized as much are the people that rely on us, because whenever I have a complication, I'm not as good of a husband, father, friend when I'm trying to deal and cope with those situations. You obviously have done this a lot. You're very skilled. You do a wide breadth of these. Are there any cases that leading into the case you still lose sleep over?
I mean, something personal to me, I never lost sleep on anything in my life. So losing sleep is not, I don't know what is insomnia. So, and I can only imagine how hard it is to have insomnia, but that happened to me. I mean, I went through youth, first lost med school, residency, tasks over tasks, tough cases, moving, whatever. I never lost a night of sleep. I am able to disconnect and relax. But I hear you, and when I see what is coming, and I know there's a tough case. A few days before I start to run in my mind different scenarios, I like to understand what is plan A, B, and C. But is interesting because at least how I function, once the thing starts, I keep my cool. Usually when and whoever trained with me and worked with me, when I got very angry and pissed, I stay quiet. I'm not one of the surgeons that will scream or start blaming the movie or the aspiration or the image or the PA or the resident. I just keep calm and keep working. So I don't lose my cool. I mean, I think I never lost my cool in doing cases, and I've done thousands of them. So, and I give some examples that something that would never happen in my state, but I operate my own brother of appendicitis, something that would never happen here. I operate my mother-in-law. So, I mean, I, 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 I booked my mom's gallbladder, and my senior partner not allowed me to do it. But for me, once the drapes are on and surgery mode is on, I complete disconnect. So probably that's why I love robotic surgery, because it's such immersive environment that just I keep my even more my focus. People ask me about music in the OR. I don't care, music or no music. You can play whatever you want. I don't want loud stuff, but whatever you want, I don't care. I just keep my focus and keep working. So I think I detach a lot during surgery, but just my way.
Is the OR kind of your little like moment of zen?
I think it is. So something that I mentioned in my presidential address, one of the books that I mentioned is called Flow, is that how to explain the psychology. It's a kind of old book, how to explain the psychologic thing that is the flow state is when you feel that everything is moving the right way, everything you are playing tennis and every hit goes to the right, you don't miss a shot, or playing golf and don't miss a shot, and time goes by like this. And that is explanation for that, and there's some requirements that need to be accomplished to jump into that flow state. And I think we got a lot of these in surgery. And if you're doing what you're training for, you are confident in what you're doing, but you still have a touch of challenge. It cannot be a boring situation as well. So I think we as surgeons, we have a great opportunity to reach flow state very often if we know what it is and we train for it.
Do you feel like you're still pushing your boundaries, even at this phase of your career, operatively?
All the time, all the time. I get bored so easily. So that's why probably I keep changing. I never look for a job, but when they offer me good opportunities, a big challenge, I always jump into it. I think I get bored with stuff, and I'm always thinking. That's why I like so much the way that we can learn surgery now. Not the only way, but one of the ways we can learn surgery is by watch other operating, because you always see a little trick or a little something that I challenge myself to apply. Um, but I'm always finding a different way to do stuff, a better way to do stuff. I think I get bored so easily, so I always pushing a little bit.
So, what's your new frontier currently?
Honestly, with you is single port. So I think that we can do a lot of single port and abdominal wall, something that was beaten so badly in the past. But I think we have a different generation of single port surgery. Sounds counterintuitive to do big incisions in the belly to do surgery, but I think we can do safely and make sense in something. So my next thing that I'm going to do in the next few months is test the waters on single port for wall surgery.
Have you considered single port scola?
Oh yeah, this is the low hanging fruit because you don't have fascial incision. So I think that probably if we can seal the skin around it, for sure is one of the first things that we should try.
Absolutely. So, I was talking with some of your friends, trying to get some dirt to ask you a good question. So, the question I have is, if you were going to have to curl up with a good book and a good pizza, what would be your choice for both?
So, I mean, a good book is very eclectic for me because I read of anything. I read books like Psychology as Flow. I can tell a bunch of them that really changed my mind. Blink, um, Range. There is a lot of those are very good. But I like a good mystery book. So now I love when I read a book and then after years it becomes a TV show or a film because I think that I got it right because after you see the film, you don't read the book. So now I just watched last month on the Netflix the Thursday Night Murder Club, and that is a mystery series, and I read all of them years ago, a couple years ago. So now they're even Netflix. So I like a good sci-fi. Another good example is The Martian, the movie. I read that book many years ago, and I read the latest book of the Andy Meyer, the author, last year. That my daughter is an avid reader. She always gives me books, and it's Holy Mary. And when I read the book and I say, man, I wish this would become a movie. And now now March is coming. So I love when that happens. So a good sci-fi, a good mystery book, some say I like some historical books. One that I enjoy to read when I moved to US is 1776 to really get a perspective. How was that year in life of America in the first year that thought that everything looked like they would be lost, and how we were able to turn. And so, as you see, I'm super eclectic. I like, and I read a couple of mystery, I get bored with that. I read a couple of psychology, I get bored with that. I go to sci-fi, and I just keep going.
And the pizza, what's your go-to pizza?
So my wife said that pizza is my favorite food. I can eat pizza, and I really not very picky on it. So I just when my wife spent 3 years doing her training because she went back to training. So she spent 3 years in Syracuse and SUNY Upstate. And then my kids are out of home. So the last year or so, I'm absolutely alone at home. So Friday night, on my way back home, I stop at Costco. $10, I buy a big pie. So I eat 2 pieces at Friday night, 2 pieces at Saturday morning, 2 pieces Saturday night. I have food for $10 for the whole weekend. So but anyways, if I need to pick a pizza, I'll go with a good Italian pizza, a prosciutto, arugula, and I think in a brick oven. I think nothing beats that. But now I'm kind of in a vibe of hot honey. I don't know if it has more fancy now stuff. We have a spicy pizza with a hot honey. I was never a fan of this, but now I'm kind of liking this a little bit more.
You're like branching out. I don't know if they sell hot honey pizza at Costco.
No, that's just pepperoni. That's all. That's all they have.
You may have to seek a little higher margin pizza for that.
But not for $10. So
Not for $10. No, definitely not. You're maybe if $10 a piece.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you've obviously been very deeply involved in the American Hernia Society. Many people probably aren't members. What's your pitch on why the American Hernia Society is a worthwhile group to belong to? And then also, what's your pitch for graduating residents and fellows to pursue hernia as a career?
So let me start for the latter. As I said, I graduated last century. I've never thought that I would be a hernia surgeon. There was not such a thing of eyeball surgery in 1997 when I graduated. So life does push you through decisions and routes that you don't expect. So that happened to me that very early in my career. So in Brazil, it's a 6-year med school out of high school. So I graduated at med school with 23 years. And general surgery residency in Brazil is only 3 years. So with 27 years old, I was a full trained surgeon in Brazil. And then I applied for some public jobs, and I took tests to see what you can. And I ended in a tiny, small community hospital. General surgery has 9 beds. So just to give an idea, with no ICU, we have this very basic laparoscopic instruments, and the insufflator high flow was 3 liters. We have 1, 2, 3. That high flow was 3. So just to give an idea. And when I get there in that hospital, the chief of surgery, there were 3 surgeons. One, the chief left to be chair of another hospital. The second oldest said, I'm too old for this. I don't want to do this. The third one took the job and was fired by the CMO of the hospital in 2 months. So 3 months in that job, the guy turned to me, you're now chief of surgery. I'm 29 years old. And I ended up being chief of surgery of a tiny community hospital, middle of nowhere in the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro. And I said, okay, let's do this. And all I did was open inguinal hernias, lap choles, if they're simples, open gastrectomies, thyroids. I did hundreds of thyroids. So I thought that I would be an endocrine surgeon. And by doing that, one medical company came talk to me and say, Dr. Malcher, you work on this hospital, you have the volume. Do you want to learn? It was actually Johnson. We want to learn PHS. I say, that double patch mesh. I say, okay. So we started doing courses for them. And when like blink, we are doing week-long courses for residents, and all this honey stuff started. And then I got to know the American Society, there were Society of Hernias, and the rest is history. So, but I never met a resident before coming to US for the last 10 years that came to me and say, I want to be a hernia surgeon. They want to be transplant surgeon. They want to be trauma surgeon. They want to be oncologist. Now that has changed, it's just amazing to see how these things change. And I feel blessed that I'm able to witness this change on this field. So my suggestion from the residents is be a little bit strategic what you like to do. Probably don't like to do one thing. You like more than one thing. Out of those, pick the one that looks more promising. And going back to books, the one that I mentioned, Range, is how you should not subspecialize very early in your career. You need to test the waters, go around, do a little bit of everything that will help you to build better skills when you finally decide what you want to subspecialize yourself. The biggest example is Roger Federer. He didn't decide to be a professional tennis player until later in his career. He was playing all different sports. So don't be afraid to test different areas of surgery before you fully committed to something. But that tags back to the American Society. And one thing that I really want to do in my presidential year, and I was not able to do everything that I wanted as imagined, but I want to redefine the field. I think that eyeball surgery should be recognized as a subspecialty. I don't have the dream to make a whole specialty, but I think there is something there. And we just don't give credit for eyeball surgery. And I always give the same parallel of HPB. So if you think about it, a cholecystectomy is a HPB surgery. Remove the gallbladder is a HPB surgery. But nobody thinks that only HPB surgeons should do cholecystectomies, right? Any bread and butter surgeons should be able to do a safe cholecystectomy. Same thing with the colorectal surgery. Any bread and butter surgeon should be doing an appendectomy, a right colectomy, even a left colectomy. But nobody doubts when you have a common bile duct injury, or you want to do a Whipple, or you want to do a right hepatectomy. You don't want to be operated by a bread and butter general surgeon. You want to go to HPV. Same with the colorectal. If you want to do a low resection or a coloanal anastomosis or a J pouch, you don't want to be operated by the generalist general surgeon. That doesn't mean they don't do colorectal surgery. I think it's the exactly same thing with the abdominal wall. The bread and butter surgeon should be able to do probably primary inguinal hernia, primary ventral hernia, a small incision hernia. Everyone should be able to do this properly. But if you want to do a recurrent hernia, do a myofascial release, a loss of domain, so those are situations that you should search for dedicated surgeons. I'm not dreaming of something that is not reality from almost every other specialty in general surgery. But it's interesting to see how physicians are reactive or surgeons are reactive to this concept. So my goal with the American Society was trying to redefine the field, and we accomplished some stuff. One is the fellowship in eyeball surgery. Now we do have a recognized fellowship by the Fellowship Council on eyeball surgery, the same way we have bariatric or advanced endoscopy. Before that, the dedicated eyeball fellowships were in the hands of a few of us that have these non-accredited fellowships and doing a great job, but there's not much opportunities over there for formal training. Now that's done. The next step, we're trying to do the focus designation practice. That's something that medical surgery should recognize. If I want to dedicate myself to wall surgery, as trauma is a focus designated specialty, you can do that. The other one is Center of Excellence, and I hate that name because that name has such bad connotation when you go back to bariatrics. But we do have data that the hernia centers, they have better outcomes than non-hernia centers cases. And how is happening out there? Everyone can raise their hand and say, I'm a hernia center. You can even pay for some seals or golden stars and put in a website, and you are a recognized hernia center. But this is empty. So as a society, you can just stay and complain and say that is not right, or you can stand up and say, you know what? I think we should start recognizing decent centers. So we are in this project to have recognized centers of excellence for American Society for centers, and we're going to collect data. You need to have the respect of collecting data, quality metrics to be long-standing recognized. So those are things that we do within, besides the courses, besides the meetings, that's all good. But we need to reshape the field of eyeball surgery. And I think that's what we're doing. So why come to American Society, to address your first question? I mean, I think now society with the social media, they lost a lot of space for continuing education, medical education, because we can do a lot of stuff online, but it's still there's some human interaction that the society brings up. I feel it's so fruitful when we spend a couple of days together, not only on the auditorium watching lectures, but mingling on the breaks and discussions. And I think that be part of society gives you the opportunity to be shoulder to shoulder with more experienced surgeons, more dedicated surgeons for the field. So really opens your mind to more dedicated stuff on that specialty. So that's why I see the big societies as American College of Surgeons, maybe even SAGES, losing a little bit of traction because they are not able to focus on a more defined. So we see the Bariatric Society, the Colorectal Society, the Hernia Society, maybe get a little bit more traction, or even Robotic Society have a little bit more traction nowadays. So I don't regret at all. I think being part of my class made me a better surgeon, made me a better physician. And I do it in a very selfish way, because I think the best way to learn is to teach. So every time you teach a resident or try to teach a fellow, or whatever happens, it makes you better. So it's a very selfish way or selfish reason to do so.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think you know, just in my experience, I think that hernia surgery is still one of those kind of core feelings of a general surgeon, that is kind of like their domain. I think, you know, if you go to an average general surgeon now and say, do you do Whipples? Most people are going to say no in these days. There are definitely people that still do, for sure, but I think that those have greatly gone to the specialists. But I do think the fight to get that recognition for the abdominal wall to be more than just a core general surgery principle for the right patient population, I think that is obviously something that's somewhat controversial among some people, of course, but definitely I definitely see your point. Do you have any lot you talked about, like the recurrent hernias, you talked about, you know, loss of domain, you talked about myofascial release. Are those really kind of your tipping points when you say that, hey, maybe if this is not something that you have a lot of experience with or have formal training in, that really those are the three things that you should really stop yourself and consider whether you should get them to a center?
I think honestly, everyone knows the limits, their own limits. You might not like the limits, you might want to push, you might not want to lose that referral, but deep inside, you do know your limits. So I would say that primary regular inguinal hernia, any general surgeon should be able to repair, open, robotic, laparoscopic, whatever you want. You should be able to repair. If you don't do that, something's wrong with your training, something's wrong with your practice. Same thing with the gallbladder. Any surgeon should be able. I still can remove a gallbladder. So it's something that an appendectomy, that's something that a laparotomy, a closure, those are basic skills. So if you don't know, a ventral hernia, the primary hernias, that is umbilical, aspergillian, epigastric, I think those they could be perfectly managed by the bread and butter surgeon. Some incisionals, if they're small, absolutely fine. So, and then you start getting any hernia defect that is larger than 5 centimeters. It's not a simple hernia. It's not a complex hernia, but it's not simple. You need to be able to offer 2 or 3 different options depending on the situation itself. If you do recurrent hernias, we have such a big ego as surgeons that always believe that we can do better than the prior guy. And you need to believe that the prior guy tried the best to do it right the first way. And we know that recurrence rates after recurrences go exponentially high. So unless it's a very simple thing that's recurrent, I think dedicated surgeons should deal with the recurrent hernias. Myofascial release, this is when I draw a line, because every time you cut fascia, you cut muscle, that is a price to be paid. And you need to know do it the right way. It was one of those point of no returns to me. So I believe that a myofascial release should be done for someone that has experience. And a TAR is the Whipple. I just can wrap my mind around that every general surgeons want to do a TAR. And they will not do a Whipple, but they want to do a TAR. And I don't know if a TAR is much easier than a Whipple. And honestly, to do it right, probably is not. So, and then you have all those complex situations: chronic pain, mesh infection, intercutaneous fistula, loss of domain. So all this grouped together are very complex, but usually those, they end being referral, because they get to a point that general surgeons say, oh man, I cannot handle that. And they will find someone to refer. The problem is the simple, they want to make complex. They want to do a ETAP because they want to do this fancy operation that everyone is doing. Or they want to tackle that middle ground situation when they are not prepared to. I'm not saying that all ETAPs should be done by a specialist, but if you are not a specialist, but you are doing ETAPs and myofascial release, you need to have extra interest. You have a little bit more than the basic training of a general surgeon.
That all very insightful. We have a recurring theme, a recurring part of the episodes, and it's called the hernia hot take. And it's when we kind of give you an opportunity to kind of give your either prediction for the future or maybe an unpopular opinion or something, and give you a chance to kind of talk about that. Do you have a hernia hot take for us?
Yeah, I can tell you what's happening in my practice right now, and it's interesting. It's interesting to grow old, because I'm 51 right now. So my body is not the same that it used to be 20 years ago, but it's still I can perform, right? We feel a little bit more here and there, but it's still not limiting us. But you get a perspective of things in life, the maturity and the experience that I'm loving to grow old. I will regret 10 or 15 years from now, but right now, so interested to see the cycles that happen. So what I'm living right now is, first of all, and I always been very controversial, but I'm telling everyone, if you want to be a AWS surgeon, if you don't do robotics, you're out of business 5, 10 years from now. You're absolutely out of business. So we have big surgeons, excellent surgeons in the United States and the world, they do open surgery. And that's great. But there would not be a next generation of big hernia surgeons 10 or 15 years from now that don't do robotics. That will not happen, believe me. Maybe just in US, it's hard to extrapolate to the rest of the world, but at least in this country, if you want to build a career in eyeball surgery and you don't do a robotic, give up. Go to trauma, go to something else. You'll not be able to be a top-notch guy in US doing eyeball if you don't do robotics. Another one is actually the myofascial release. So probably 3 years ago, I remember myself, my mindset is, how can I justify to do a ETAP? Oh, this patient has a diastasis, so I'll do a ETAP. This patient has a recurrent hernia, it's only 3 centimeters, but it's recurrent. I need to do a ETAP. So that completely changed my mind now. I'm trying to avoid myofascial release as much as I can. So I do less ETAPs than I used to do. Even the TARs, I think we have options to avoid TARs nowadays. I'm not saying it's wrong to do TARs, absolutely fine, but I think we were overdoing TARs and releases. And it's hard. There's a billing situation behind this that I exempt myself as academic surgeon, but it's reality. We need to recognize that. But at the end of the day, the surgery needs to be done for the patient, not for us. It's not because it's a cool, there's something that I learned online, that I did a course, that I'm eager to do, or test something new that we are going to do it. It needs to be the right fit for the patient. So my most exhausting day of the week is actually tomorrow, Wednesday, that I have a full day of clinic. I see 35 patients, 40 patients a day. I'm not physically tired at the end of the day, but mentally exhausted, because every patient that comes to the room, you need to run the algorithm in your mind, knowing you are not that you have an algorithm, but you do have one in your mind to decide where that patient will fit in your clinic, on your practice. So this is exhausting, but that's what makes us really true eyeball surgeons, to really find the way to tailor the approach for that specific clinic situation. So robotics take over. We need to be very conservative with myofarynx release and see what comes in the future.
I greatly appreciate your time. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. We will let you get on with the rest of your day. I'm sure you still have things to do. But thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Hernia Gods podcast, and we will catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.